Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Marbad's tomb, playing as Norsca against the forces of the Lizardmen. So I've been on a bit of a Norsca kick lately, and I wasn't even messing around with chariots. There's been some pretty active debate on the forums about Norsca not having caster lords and all that sort of stuff. And some complaints about Norsca not being a bit underpowered. So I kind of figured, why not? Let's play some Norsca. Let's do some ridiculous stuff. So for this composition here, I did decide to run Throg the Troll King as my lord, because we are going against Lizardmen, and I figured the anti-large, the frostbite, it's all pretty good. Throg does have 6,000 HP, which is very solid. He's got a weapon strength of almost 500, bonus versus large, great melee stats all over. The only disadvantage really is that he's got low armor and he's big, so he's very, very susceptible to shooting. But he also does have his Vomit projectile, Copious Vomit. He's got Foe Seeker, he's got Fight or Die, just a very solid lord overall. For our front line here, it is a trio of Marauder champions. Against Lizardmen, I find that non-AP, high melee defense, tanky infantry is actually generally a pretty good choice, because Lizardmen, Saurus warriors, and even Templar Guard will generally struggle to cut through them. So Marauder champions are a relatively cheap and I think efficient counter against most Lizardmen troops. They are backed here by a single unit of the Brutes of the Hound. If we can get them into good engagement against, say, Skinks or Saurus Warriors to get those really roid up their melee attack, they can then become an absolute buzzsaw that scythes through enemy troops. For a bit more anti-infantry support, I did bring two casters on Chariots, who one of them is Lord of Fire, one of them is Lord of Metal. They have a handful of spells apiece. One does have, of course, Kindle Flame, Cascading Fire Cloak, and Flaming Sword of Ruin, as well as Scroll of Shielding. The other one, Plague of Rust and Searing Doom. I do apologize there. They are backed by two Marauder Hunters with Javelins, as well as a very hefty shooting contingent on either end. Marauder Horsemen and Horsemasters on both sides, and then some Hounds to do some backline harass and chase chameleon skinks and units like that. You might have been wondering why no throwing axes? Well, because I mostly want to be dealing with skinks. I was very aware that Throg is going to be a prime target for Skink Chief harass. It's something you need to deal with somehow, and I figured Marauder Horsemen are the best way to go. Plus, if my opponent does have, say, Krokgar or Stegodons or Bastillodons, we do have Plague of Rust to debuff their armor and make all of these non-AP units much more effective. Now, my opponent did decide to go with Jabba the Hutt over here. So, the front line, very elite stuff. 3 units of Temple Guard, backed by Saurus Spears. These guys, if you bring Fimir as Norsca, of course, will hold up rather well. They'll be able to hold their own and do quite a bit of damage. They're backed by some Skink Skirmishers, who, despite not having great weapon damage at all, there's a lot of them. There's 90 of them, and they can kind of shoot and poke away at you, and they've got poison, and just a general nuisance. There are 2 Bastillodons with the Ref Crystals, who, of course, are not at pushover in combat, and they'll heal. They can keep these guys in the fight much longer than they should. By all rights, endure. The 2 Skink Chiefs, as we mentioned already, you can see some vomit going down in these Saurus Spears. This was a bit of a misplay. I didn't realize there was... Initially, I didn't kind of glossed over the front line, saw some of the Temple Guard. Didn't realize there was actually a unit that was not Temple Guard, and go figure, that's the unit I targeted with vomit. So, oh well. It is what it is. In the back, in the meantime, Jabba the Hutt with Net, with Harmonic Convergence, and Apotheosis. No Curse of the Meta Wind, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, but that is what it is. Sunburst Standard of Hexoatl, Banishment, and Ruination of Cities, as well as Shield of the Old Ones. Now here my opponent is going to drop a Net of a Mintok. Interesting choice, because it doesn't really do anything here. But rather than being smart, what I'm going to do here is really going to screw me over. I push in with my Marauder Hunters at Javelins, immediately get netted, because I was trying to get them to shoot at the Bastillodon, immediately get netted like an idiot. And we are going to be in for beating as my opponent drops Banishment, and I, of course, have no way to dodge it because I'm in the net. So, yeah. Professional tip of the day, kids, don't walk into a net. And, of course, my Marauder Hunters are immediately going to be on the verge of routing. In the meantime, though, my Marauder Horsemen are doing their very best to poke at the Skink Chief, who in turn are doing their very best to be a pain in the rear to Throg. And Throg's definitely taking quite a beating here. He's definitely losing hundreds of HP pretty quickly. We're going to be able to start chipping away at the Bastillodon. I hit it with a Plague of Rust. Perhaps a little prematurely here, because we didn't really have the tools to shoot at it. But over here in the meantime, the front line definitely going in our favor, with Throg is kind of able to dive in there. We've got Flaming Sword of Ruin going, which is scything through these guys, buffing up all of our non-AP infantry a whole bunch. And we're able to do quite some work, and you can see the Skink Chiefs here definitely not having the grandest time of things. My opponent focusing very heavily on Throg, just trying to knock him out with all these Skink Skirmishers, but we're able to dive in from the flanks with our doggies and start routing these Skink Skirmishers off, or start doing damage to them, which is really important, tie them down. And potentially save Throg's life. But my opponent actually doing a good job here counterattacking against Throg. Throg's down to less than half health. Mazdamundi's going to dive in. Throg getting really not kicked out of him, and unfortunately, that's really not good, and I don't have another Plague of Rust available. What I do, though, is I do take my Shaman Sorcerers, and I'm going to plow through the back line. I'm going to start jumping around, distracting these King Skirmishers, teaching them a good old lesson. And you can see the Shaman Sorcerers here are just racking up the kills, doing some great work here, dancing around in the back line. Meantime, Jabba the Hutt definitely holding his own, and up to 33 kills. Of course, most of that probably from banishment, but Throg's almost actually a goner. He's getting picked away by the King Chiefs. He's actually terrified here. Bit of a mistake on my part. But Jabba the Hutt is definitely a bit committed. He's definitely a bit bogged down. He's fighting Throg, and Throg is going to get unterrified in a little bit. You can see a Ruination of Cities going down the back there against a lot of horsemen, but not really able to shut me down. Down goes the Plague of Rust, and suddenly Jabba is very, very vulnerable. Sure, he's got, I do believe, 27% missile resist because he's on a Stegodon. Sure, he's got 80 armor still, but with so much anti-large, then with Throg diving in, and Throg's of course going to apply Frostbite, making it impossible for him to extricate himself, suddenly Jabba the Hutt is in a grim position, and of course if he drops a Cold-Blooded on himself, he's going to be even easier for Throg to beat up. He drops Shield of the Old Ones, which is useless against my lack of magic damage, and finally, in desperation, drops Cold-Blooded, which is just getting melted through because the crossfire here is immense. We've got these Marauder Horsemen over here, pouring the fire in. We've got Marauder Hunters with Javelins, and we've got Marauder Horsemen and Horsemasters over there. So Jabba is just getting annihilated, and he's going to get his, he's really going to get his butt handed to him and just chased out. And Throg actually takes him down, so you can see the fat toad there just goes down. And that's it for him. Now the Bastodon does dive in, trying to distract Throg, but honestly the Bastodon's not really a threat to Throg. His melee stats are pathetic. Chariots in the meantime still running ham up to the 40s in their kills, which is not bad. They're going to be able to do some damage to these Temple Guard. My opponent's army, though, at this point is essentially in full rout. It's only these two Bastillodons. Throg still has enough HP to heal. He's still got enough regen, potentially, to the point that if I just pull him out and buy myself some time, I'll be able to deal with these Bastillodons eventually. And my opponent at this point is going to suffer army losses. So surprisingly efficient build. Now Throg proved incredibly susceptible, and what I found is that the Marauder Hunters and the Horsemen, despite very high hopes I had for them to deal or to dispatch the King Chiefs, they essentially failed. They really couldn't do the job. We had 6 units focusing on the King Chiefs, or maybe 4 depending on the time, but the match. But in the match we were in, but there was somewhere between 4 and 6 units always focusing on the King Chiefs, and they were not able to take the King Chiefs down. They weren't really able to do meaningful damage still, despite the bigger hitbox and all that. And Throg just had to suffer through it. He just had to tank the damage, which really sucked. There's not really much you can do about that. I could have brought a Frostworm or a Manticore, but that just doesn't sound good either. You're not gonna be able to catch this King Chief with a Manticore. A Frostworm, well, even there's not much guarantee, because this King Chief can probably poison you. Perhaps if you get a breath attack and follow it up immediately with a and then get this King Chief into your, oh, maybe you could get this King Chief. That might be something worth testing at some point with the Frostworm, if they're an effective counter to King Chiefs. Because if you can get, say, bring Wolfric instead of Throg, hit a King Chief with a Hunter of Champions or something along those lines, you get your Frostworm near them. The Frostworm can then frostbite them, can then slow them with its chilling aura, and potentially take them out. But then again, if there's 2 King Chiefs, you're suddenly in a lot of trouble. So I'm not entirely sure how you do it, but definitely a few things worth considering. Regardless, good game to my opponent codes here. If I was to have any criticism, I don't actually think Temple Guard well, I think King Skirmishers and the Bastillodons are kind of, I'm not that big of a fan of the Rev Crystals and the King Skirmishers in this. I think Temple Guard can hold, but you just need some combat staying power to really break up these mobs of heavy troops. Sure, you need something to deal with. You could bring Croxigors, I think. That could be a decent pick. You could bring Stegodons or units like that. I think you'd be in a decent spot. I don't really think this is 1,200 gold invested in King Skirmishers, another 2,000 Rev Crystals. For units that aren't really contributing that much combat-wise. Sure, they're getting a little bit of chip damage, but they're not going to solve your problem of heavy infantry. This army doesn't have much to deal with heavy infantry. The Temple Guards will only trade okay, and the rest of these troops just won't do very much. Mazdamundi will do okay. That's about it. So that's my main criticism. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below to keep up with additional content. If you have any questions, any comments, any criticism, as usual, do not hesitate to ask, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.